All right, in my last video, I mentioned the possibility of doing a modern sharpening video as well. So I'm gonna sharpen this knife here today for my buddy. This is a Southern Avo, one of the first run Avos. I can't remember. I think that was 2, 3, 4 years ago that these came out. So I'm going to sharpen this knife today, and I'm just going to kind of focus more on the setup this time than the actual sharpening. So I'm going to shift in a second, and I'm going to show you kind of what I'm going to use, and then I'll talk about setting up the wicked edge. I might shoot the footage of me actually sharpening, but it's going to just be kind of fast forwarded through, and then at the end I'll show you how sharp the knife is like I always do. So here, this is everything that hold on, let me get the viewfinder turned around. This is everything that I'm going to be using today. So I'll start down here. This wrench, I broke my wrench and then I lost it, but that wrench is going to go for the adjustments of the jaws here, and for me to adjust the coarse adjustment of the angle, which this whole bracket slides in 1 degree increments, and then it'll be for me to adjust this here and this here, which allows me to adjust as small as, I think it's like 0.05 degrees. So I'm gonna actually have to take this knife apart. So I've got my Husky Torx wrench, and the reason why I'm gonna have to take this apart is because this knife does not have a sharpening choil, and that edge is kind of close to the handles. So I don't really want to bang into either the handle or the edge of the blade. And you can see, even from the factory, without having that sharpening choil, they really didn't do such a great job down here at the base of the edge. You can kind of see that large flat spot, and then they don't meet up equally. It's a little bit higher on this side than it is on the other. In between stones, I'm going to be using this toothbrush to brush my stones off so that dust doesn't stay on the stones and cause rust. I'm going to mark the edge of the blade with this when I initially start, so I can kind of see where I'm going to be taking material off at. I may use this piece of chamois here in the jaws of the wicked edge, because this is a fairly thin blade, and I think you can see that here. So it's a fairly thin blade. I know some of you guys might say that's not thin, but in this clamp, in this system, it is a little bit thin, and it might shift back and forth some. So I want to put something in there to keep it as perpendicular as possible. As I set it up, I'm going to use this Accu Remote, I believe is the name of it, angle gauge. This is going to help me set my angle on either side, and I also use this to make sure my blade is perpendicular to the base of the wicked edge. So you also want to record your settings, and you can see here go a few knives that I've sharpened. I usually mark exactly which one of these I use, either the top or the bottom set of holes. B6, that would be when you place a knife in here. You can use this ruler, and on the ruler there are markings, and those markings tell you how far your blade sticks out. And then the last one would obviously be the degree measurement. So that way, every time I come back over here to this, I can always make sure I'm setting it up exactly the same each and every time. This blue painter's tape, if I was going to keep this knife together, I would probably tape over the pivot section, because I don't want that dust and grime and dirt to get down here into the pivot. I also sometimes, if it's a thicker blade, and maybe on this one, maybe I might try it on this one, I'll put it on the blade itself, so that way there's little bits of dust and stuff that get in here, some burrs. I don't want to scratch up somebody else's knife. Now, if it's my knife, especially if it's like one of my Striders or something like that, I usually don't tape it off. I just, use it. Here go all of my stones, and I keep them, if I'm sitting back here, then I usually keep my stones up here. I'm not going to go all the way down to the 100 stones. I'm probably going to start with 400, then I'm going to go to 600, 800, 1000, 1200 ceramic, 1600 ceramic. Then I will use the 5 micron strops on leather, 3.5 micron strops on leather, the 1 micron and then the 0.5 on leather. And that'll bring me up to a mirror polish. Okay, I've got the knife set up in here. I took the liberty of cutting through a few steps. I didn't figure I needed to include all of that in the video. So I've chosen the top slot and I've placed my key in here. I've placed this key in here through the ruler into the top slot. You want to sit your knife down on this key, and then you want to decide where your knife needs to be on here. I chose B. What happens is the further you slide it forward or the further you slide it back, it affects how the stone is going to hit the edge of this blade down here, the end of the knife, and it'll change, you know, kind of how your angle's going to look. I don't think we'll have any issues, but that's why I'm going to put some black Sharpie on here. If I don't like the way it looks when I take a few swipes, and I'm going to use my 1000 grit stone for that, the highest diamond stone I have. If I don't like the way it looks, where it's hitting the pattern it's making, then I'll adjust it from there. But right now, I'm on the top slot. I've got it set to B on the ruler. I've got some blue painter's tape in here. The knife did look like it was going to be okay to sit in here without the chamois. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to actually use my angle cube. I'm going to turn it on. And once I have it on, I'm going to place it down here on my base. And I'm going to 0 the cube, and that usually takes a second. And once I have it zeroed, I'm going to place it up here. Well, I'm going to take this out the way. I'm going to place that up here, and I'm going to look at my measurements, the degrees I'm getting. And it looks like I'm getting 5.6 on this side of the knife blade itself, and I'm getting 5.15 or so on this side. So it's not exactly perfect, but it's about as close as I'm gonna get. 5.60, and then on this side I'm getting 4.5. So I'm gonna adjust this a little bit. I'm gonna see if maybe tightening this clamp down here, tightening the bottom part, because I should have done that. I did not do that. And I'm going to tighten this top part again. And I'll see if that shifts the blade any left or right, because ultimately I want it as perpendicular, as up and down as possible to this base, because that's going to give me even bevels on both sides, or very close to even bevels on both sides. So I'm going to measure again. So that makes it 5.45, which took it down some, which is good. So this side should have gone up. So that's right about 4.85. So I'm gonna twist these a little bit more and see if I can't get that a little bit closer. Okay, so it looks like now I'm right at about 5 degrees, and on this side I'm at about 5.5 degrees, and I think that's going to be about as close as I can get. I'm going to pick this up and show you what I'm talking about. So if you look here, you can see it says 5.45 there, and if I move it to the other side, and I'm not setting it, I'm using the base of the vise just as a rest, but this is purely on the knife blade itself. So if you look there, I believe you can see it. If you look there, that's 5 degrees. So we're about half a degree off. I think that's going to be okay. If not, we'll have to readjust after the fact, but I think that we're going to be okay. So from this point, now I'm ready, pretty much ready to go ahead and start setting the angle of the actual stones. So what I'm going to do before I even do that is I'm going to turn off my angle cube. I'm going to put that back in its sleeve down here, and I am going to mark the edge of this knife. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but I'm going to mark the edge of this knife with this marker, which I sat out while I was making the video like an idiot, and it's dry. So, oh well, hold on one second. At this point, I think I've dried my marker out and I don't have another one. So I'm just going to have to use my eyes and kind of see where it's hitting along this edge here. So what I'm going to do is, like I told you, I'm going to use my 1000 grit stone. I only use one for this because I can only judge one side at a time. I'm going to set the course adjustment down here to 20 degrees because I think this is going to be right in the ballpark of 40 degrees, and I want to try to match this angle as much as possible. Tyler didn't really give me a specific angle that he wanted. He just said he wanted it polished, so I'm just going to try to run as close to the factory as I can. So I've already set this to 20, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to place this up here. I want this as close to parallel to the clamp as possible, so I use my fingers to align that. The stone is on the 1000 grit side. I'm going to take out my angle cube again. I'm going to turn it on. I'm going to make sure that it's zeroed. And once I've made sure that it's zeroed, I like to place it right up here as close to the top of this stone as I can and make it parallel. So I run my finger across it to make sure that they're flush. Then I'm going to lay it back up here as close to parallel again to the clamp as I can. And this is right at, it's bouncing back and forth between 20.15 and 20.30. So I'm going to adjust this little worm gear here. And once I do that, I'm going to move the arm and sit it back down so I can get an accurate measurement. And I'm going to continue to do that until I get right to the 20 degree mark. And I was apparently turning it the wrong way, so we'll try that again. So that is reading 20.00. So that's exactly what I want. I'm going to take this off of here. I'm going to switch to the other side. Same exact process. I'm going to sit the angle guide as close to the top of this as I possibly can. Make sure it's flush with my finger. Lay it on the edge of the knife. I don't want to rub it on the knife because I don't want to scratch anything. I'm just resting it on there, and I'm going to make sure it's parallel to this clamp. So again, it's parallel to the clamp. I have not adjusted the course adjustment down here, so I'm going to undo the screw at the bottom. Right now it's reading 16 degrees, so I know I need to go out. Right here, it's reading 19 well, now it's reading 19. Now I'm just bouncing back and forth. I'm going to move it out a little bit more. All right, so that's reading 19.90. I'm going to move the arm away from the knife, place it back on the knife, and we're at 19.5. So I know that that's a little bit steeper or a little bit shallower than I want. It's not enough angle. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to adjust the fine adjustment. And I'm going to make sure we're at 20 degrees. It's reading 20 degrees exactly. It's reading, it just read 20.10 to 19.90. So I'm going to look at this again. You also want to make sure that it's not laying like this. You want to make sure it's laying flat up against the edge of the blade. So it's measuring 20 degrees, and I usually give it a second because sometimes it'll take a second to fluctuate. So it's right on 20 degrees on this side. It's right on 20 degrees on this side. I'm going to take this away. I don't need this angle cube anymore, so I'm going to turn it off, put it in its case, and put it away. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a light pass, and I'm going to see exactly where these scratches are forming at. So just enough so I can see. And that looks like it might even be a little bit shallower than the factory angle. But I would rather be a little bit shallower than the factory angle. And by shallow, that means it's hitting higher at the top of the edge than right in the middle of the edge. So if it's doing that, I know I'm not going to make this bevel too wide. And me personally, aesthetically, I like to keep the bevels as thin as I possibly can. So the bevel thickness, if you don't know, if you're not familiar with that term, is how wide that shiny part is. So see how it's like a thin shiny portion now? That shiny part will get wider as you decrease your angle on here. So here I've got 20 degrees. If I were to go down to 15 degrees or 10 degrees, that would make this bevel wider and wider. But you can see here the little bit that my marker did mark, you can see where that stone is hitting it right along the edge of the apex. So that's going to be okay. I just want to make sure that I match that angle all the way down, and we'll be good to go. Once I check the angle on the right side, I'm going to do the same thing on the left side. Again, just a light pass, just to kind of see where I'm hitting. And that looks like it's hitting in the same place. So it looks like our bevels are going to be pretty even. That's going to be good. The last thing that I need to do before I go ahead and start sharpening is I'm going to put some tape here. And I know at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I was going to take the knife apart. Well, the pivot of the knife here is Loctited, and that means that I would have to, you know, get out a hair dryer or boil some water and somehow get some heat into that pivot, and therefore cause it to loosen up. And I don't want to do all of that. It's not my knife. I don't want to do anything too intrusive to a knife that doesn't belong to me. So I'm just going to use some blue painter's tape, and I'm just going to tape the whole thing up as well as I can in both directions. With the final one, I like to tape like this from the top towards the bottom. So that way, as the dust falls, it won't be able to get into the pivot area itself. This should shield it. So I've got it taped this way, and I've got it taped this way at least twice. So that's going to protect my handles. That's going to protect the dust from getting down here into the pivot. Again, this might be something I do with my knives. It might not. It really depends. I more or less do this when I'm doing this with a knife that has bearings or something like that. If it's a knife that's already been sharpened before and I only need to touch it up, I don't really worry about taping it up, because I'm not really going to have enough sharpening in the knife, enough material removed to really worry about it getting down into here. But this knife is going to need a complete reprofile. So it's taped up. It's good to go. I've checked the angles on both sides. I've checked to make sure that the blade is as perpendicular to this base as I can get it. I have put everything up. That's the next thing. You want to make sure you've got your area as clean as possible. You don't want anything in your way. And now the last step is to remove this stone and pick the stone you want to start with. As I said, I'm going to start with the 400s. So I'm just going to get these 400 grit stones here, and I like to start on the right hand side, as you saw in my last video, and I prefer a motion like this, up and down. And I'm just going to have to be very careful back here at the back of the knife. So I'm just going to go back and forth like this, and I'm going to alternate stones through the progression that I showed you, and I'm going to remove material with each stone and progress as I go along. And I can already see that already pretty much has apexed it, even with just that little bit of work. So this isn't going to take too long. I think I'm just going to cut the video. You've already seen how I progress through the stones. I think I have a piece of paper here. I'll show you. The knife is not, it's not sharp at all. So I'm going to cut this. I'll come back when I get finished, and I'll show you the finished product. I know I said I wasn't going to go through the whole process with you guys with the sharpening, but I do want to show you this. You can see here I've already run through my 400 grit stone, and you can see how that shiny area has increased all the way across. You can see that it is still pretty close to what the factory was. Now, as I sharpen on this side of the blade, the right side of the blade, I'm going to feel on the left side of the blade, and what I want to feel is a ridge, almost like my fingers getting caught on a little piece of metal. That's what's called the burr. Once you have that burr, then you know that you're ready to switch to the other side. Now, as you get to the end of your sharpening, you want to remove that burr. So that might mean that you need to make a light pass or two on one side, and then a light pass or two on the other side until you don't feel that burr on either side. Now, there are two schools of thought on this process. Some people say that with that first stone, or earlier in the stones, you don't necessarily need to set a burr, because what's going to happen is as you progress through the stones, if you're going to use 3 or 4 stones, you're going to take material away slowly but surely on each end, and eventually those 2 ends are going to meet up in what they call apex at the top. And some people say that you lose less steel that way, so you don't need to make a burr at the beginning, because that's taking away more steel at the beginning. I really don't think that people sharpen knives enough to worry about losing a lot of steel in general. I know there are some people that sharpen their knives fairly regularly because they use them fairly heavily, but most of us aren't sharpening our knives even once a month. So I don't see the problem with forming a burr with the first set of stones, especially with a knife that has some damage to it like this one did. Out here at the tip, it had a few rolls in the edge and maybe a couple of chips. So I think just really setting a clean edge from the beginning and starting with a good foundation to build that edge for the end process is just the best way to go. Just my opinion. I'm going to kind of show you after each stone progression what the edge looks like. So this is after the 600 grit. And I know that may or may not be coming across too great in the video, but you can kind of see it's getting a little bit shinier, but you know, we're not there yet. Also, I don't know if this will come across in the video either, but yeah, it is. You see how at the edge there, you can kind of see what looks like a little bit of, I'm sorry, right here at the tip, you can kind of see those spots there. That is actually the burr. And I don't know if you can hear that, but do you hear how that sounds like I'm plucking something? That is that actual burr that I was talking about. And sometimes you can see that and sometimes you can't, but see how it kind of moves? You can see it kind of change as I run my finger over it. See how the light hits it a little bit differently? And I know that's kind of in focus and not in focus. I apologize, but I'm doing the best I can here. But that's the burr that I was talking about. So 600 grit, that's what the finish looks like. And that at the tip is the burr that I was talking about. This is the 800 grit finish. And again, I don't know exactly how well that's going to come across in the footage, but you can kind of see here, you're starting to refine the scratch pattern, but we're not quite there yet. I'll show you right around the ceramics. That's when you really start to see the mirror edge start to take place. Now on this steel is sharpening a lot easier than a lot of the steels I sharpen, and I'm using medium pressure on the stones. I forgot to mention that. So just a note. This is after 1000 grit, and I hope you can kind of see the, we're not mirror polished yet, but the shine is starting to happen. You're really going to start to see that mirror polish take place. Like I said, towards the 1600, and really the next big step that I notice a difference in is the 0.5, the 1 micron strop, and then the 1 micron strop, and then the 0.5 micron strop. So the reason why I'm kind of showing you guys the differences in the finish, or at least trying to show you the differences in the finish, I know it might not be coming across that well, is because people are interested in wicked edges. They see the kits come with certain stones, they want a mirror finish, and I don't think that everybody knows you're going to have to invest in some more stones if you really want that mirror finish. And I don't think that Clay or anyone at Wicked Edge would have an issue with saying that either. Now, you know, obviously there are lots of different ways to go about getting the mirror polish, but in my opinion, you need to invest in the 1200 and 1600 grit ceramics, and then at least the 5 and 3.5 micron strops. Just my opinion. I also, as I showed you, also have the 0.5 and the 1 micron strops, and that's how I get the edges that I get. And if you look at my Instagram page or anything like that, or any of the knives I've shown on here, you can see the types of finishes that I get. So I'll let that speak for itself. So that's kind of why I'm going through these different progressions, and I decided to add this in here. I'm going to show you 1200 and 1600 grit next. At this point, what I really like to do is I really like to kind of make sure that burr is almost gone, because the ceramics are not going to remove as much steel. They're really going to just be more polishing. So here I want to really make sure that burr is almost gone, if not all the way gone. One other tip, when you have the ceramics, you're going to want this little thing here called a super eraser. And basically all you do is you use it like an eraser. You run it over the edge of your ceramic, and it gets it clean. So you're going to want to clean these every once in a while. And I prefer to use this super eraser. And I believe I got this from Chef Knives to Go, I think. Chef Knives to Go. So just another tip. Okay, this is the 1200 grit edge ceramic. And again, I don't know how much this is coming across, but I think you can see before there were like pockets of shininess, and now you see the shininess is a little bit more even along the bevel. So that's 1200 grit. I'm going to go up to 1600 grit next. I'll show you that. And at 1600, I really try to make sure that that burr is gone, because once I get the leather, I don't want any kind of a burr at all. Okay, this is 1600 grit. And again, I don't know how well this is going to come across in the video. But you can see now how that all those smaller scuff marks, for the most part, are pretty much gone. And you can see here at 1600 grit, this is the level of sharpness that we have. So this is going to give you that razor sharp edge, but it's still going to be kind of toothy. So if you really want to have a sharp edge that doesn't have that tooth to it, something that's really going to shave hairs, split hairs, and just slice through paper like crazy, you're going to want to take it up to the strops. This here still has a little bit of tooth to it. This would be a perfect working edge. You really wouldn't even need to go up to the 1200 or 1600 for just a working edge. I would probably just leave it at maybe 800 or 1000. Okay, this is 5 microns, and I think you can really start to see that mirror kind of shine through now. So as I said, the ceramics really set you up to start to get that good base for a mirror edge once you hit the strops. So that's just at 5 microns, and I know I'm not too tight, but I think you can see there that that mirror is really starting to pop right now. And this is the 3.5 micron, and I think that you can see that mirror polish is picking up even more. And this is with strops that are pretty loaded with steel. You can see all that dark shiny material, that's steel. So these need to be cleaned, my 3.5 and my 5, but I haven't quite gotten around to it yet. But you can see they still work very well. This is the 1 micron strop after the 1 micron, and I think you can see there it still is picking up. And 1 micron is really where I think I see another big jump in the polish. And last but not least, this is after the 0.5 micron strop, and you can really see that mirror come through. Now if you pulled out a loop and a light, you would see some scratches still there, but this is going to be still a very, very, very quality mirror finish. And nothing you're going to be disappointed in, something that is as mirror as you would like. And you can see the knife is just razor sharp. You see how much sharper it is than off of these ceramics. I mean, it's just, that would just cut through anything. So that's my process. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. If you have any questions or anything, post them down below. I'm coming up on 200 subscribers. I have a couple of videos with almost 300, 400 views. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate sticking with me through the process. I hope to continue to make more videos, and I hope you guys continue to watch. I'll catch you in the next one.